Today, Russia and Ukraine signed agreements that clear the way for exporting millions of tons of desperately needed Ukrainian grain, as well as guaranteeing Russian exports of its grain and fertilizers. Ukraine is one of the world's largest exporters of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil. Cutting off its supply had sent grain prices higher worldwide and threatened global food security, compounding famine in parts of Africa. John Yang has more.
Judy, the deal aims to end a wartime standoff that's had some 20 million tons of grain stuck in Ukrainian ports since the Russian invasion. 3 Ukrainian ports will now be open. Shipments have been blocked by both a Russian naval blockade and Ukraine's use of mines to defend the ports. Today's agreement guarantees safe passage for Ukrainian vessels from the ports, overseen by a coordination center in Turkey. Earlier, I spoke with a key negotiator, UN Undersecretary Martin Griffiths. I asked him about the significance of the agreement.
The principal significance for us is, of course, the contribution to reducing food insecurity around the world. This is an agreement for the world. It's not an agreement just for Ukraine or Russia or even Europe. And if I'm right, we've seen wheat prices go down today by 4 or 5% because of the agreement. So the two ways in which this food insecurity around the world, which has been so attributable in large part to the Ukraine war, is that there'll be much more grain and fertilizers out into the market from both Russia and Ukraine, but also that they will come at a reduced price. I cannot think of an example of an agreement mediated between 2 warring parties in the middle of a hot war, producing a benefit that is attributable to global welfare. I don't think that has happened before. It's also an agreement made by the two parties. It shows they can do that. They can negotiate in good faith and come to an agreement.
How quickly, how soon do you think grain will start leaving Ukrainian ports? And perhaps more important, how soon will the effects be felt in the areas suffering from famine now?
The Ukrainians were telling us here today that their ports would be ready to export grain within 2 days, 2 or 3 days. They're ready to go. They have to identify safe shipping lanes, and then the corridor across the Black Sea that has to be done also with our Joint Coordination Center. So setting that up and getting inspection teams ready is probably going to take a couple of weeks. Impact on places in famine, of course, it depends where those are. The one that's very much at the top of my agenda, the Horn, right, where we see absolutely terrible prospects in Somalia. So I think we'll see immediately prices tapering down, which will be felt by people in those areas of conflict. Famine is a bit more complicated because it's not just a price issue, although it is partly. It's also getting produce there. And to get wheat, let's say, from Odessa to Egypt or to, through to Port Sudan or something, takes some weeks. So I think we'll have an impact on the market immediately. But there are some places, this is what's so bad about this year, who are already perhaps beyond the point where this can deliver.
This, of course, agreement deals with grain that's already been harvested. It's been sitting in the ports. But there has been great destruction to one of the great breadbaskets of the world in the farmland in Ukraine. How much of a problem will that present in the future, the damage and destruction to farmland in Ukraine?
There's been talk about getting tractor spares and so on back in to Ukraine and, by the way, to Russia. And this came up from time to time in this negotiation of our Black Sea deal, where we said, look, we're just negotiating grain out at the moment. We've got to make that the simple-ish priority. But if the parties agree and build confidence, they could start importing stuff into Ukraine to do the job that you're talking about. But let us be under few illusions, this ain't stopping the war. This is just getting the grain out. I'd like to think that the fact that the parties can agree to this means that maybe there will come a time when this confidence between them can make them agree to other things too. And we're already beginning to have kind of conversations about that.
You mentioned also that there's a piece of this about Russian grain and Russian fertilizer.
Yeah.
Could you explain that to us?
There are two agreements signed today. What is involved in that is removing impediments to the export of grain and fertilizer from Russia. As you know, they're not sanctioned anyway. So this isn't about removing sanctions, but it's removing impediments. So even if you don't have a sanction, banks won't get involved in trading out the grain and fertilizer from Russia. So it's about comfort letters, it's about statements by particularly the US and the EU that no, grain and fertilizer, please export them.
Secretary General referred to this as a beacon of hope and a beacon of possibility. You also talked about the sort of unusual aspect of this, that this is an agreement between warring parties. Could this also show some hope and some possibility of other areas of negotiation, other areas of agreement?
I hope so. I would like to think that this will encourage us, Turkey, the parties, to think of further humanitarian areas where we can find better agreements. There's still large parts of Ukraine where humanitarian access is limited because of the fighting. And we are still trying to get our aid in through cross lines and so forth. Let's at least look to humanitarian benefits in war. And then let's dream a little about whether we could move from there.
Martin Griffiths, the UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.